waizi wa KEMSA, wale majudges waizi ambao wamefanya kesi zinaenda namna yote tutanyo.
Our guest this morning has a long story to tell. He started as a street boy. He became a policeman, went to the special branch, knew about Robert Oko's death, became a refugee, and he studied law at length. Now he wants to be your president. We are talking about Mr. George Wajackoyah. Welcome.
Professor Wajackoyah.
You are now a professor.
Yes, sir.
But we knew you as a fugitive and a madman.
Yes, yes.
Tell us a little bit about your background from childhood.
Well,
in short, it can take a whole day, but
yes,
short, yeah.
My parents divorced when I was a young boy in Western Province in Mumias, and I was left for the custody of my grandparents. Life became very difficult. Then, without going into nitty-gritties, I strode away from home to Nairobi, where I became a street boy for years, until the Hare Krishna picked us from the streets. And I remember having featured in a newspaper story by Sam Kahiga in 1977 as one of those boys who was picked up by the Hare Krishna to be taken to the temple. While at the temple, some Asian Samaritans came in, and they took me to their school, paid for my fees, and that's how I grew up.
And after that, you become a policeman?
Yes, after my A-levels, unfortunately, I didn't get enough grades to go to the university, though I passed. I joined the police as a police constable, worked at Central Police Station for some years, before I went back to Kiganjo to train as a police inspector, and then from there I was returned back to the city, Pangani Police Station. Then I was enrolled in the security intelligence, where I worked until my detention.
And why were you detained?
Well, as fate may take it, I was one of the officers who was designated to investigate the case of the late Honorable Minister Robert Oko. And when the findings were not pleasing, some of us were transferred, and I was detained.
What findings did you find out?
Well, I cannot speak on the findings right now because the case is in court. And
there's no case in court?
It will be contempt of court. The case is in British courts. It has been there.
What court case is this?
Well, those mentioned in the case, as published by the British newspapers by that particular time, filed a petition in the British courts, and I cannot discuss it or even mention because the case is still pending.
I don't understand. Kenya is not under British colonial rule. So whatever court cases take place in Britain, they have nothing to do with us.
Let me bring it to you.
And I don't know anyway who has filed a case against who.
Well, those mentioned in the story.
Whose story?
In the story that was published in the British press.
Emanating from who?
From the complainants, whom I'm not going to mention because I can't mention. But also, by the way, let me correct you here. Kenya is a signatory to international law. Therefore, it's obligated to observe the jurisdiction's findings of other courts, in which case, if I mention it here, it may amount to contempt of court. And I do not want it to go that way now that I'm running for the presidency of this country.
What you are saying is that you cannot discuss why you are detained.
Well, as I said before, I said, and I'll repeat it very clearly, that I was involved in the investigation of the late Minister Robert Oko.
Yes.
And whatever was found was communicated back to the government, particularly to my superiors. But then, because of that case, I ended up in detention.
Yes.
Of which I'm not going to give specifics. And then after that, I went to Britain through a good Samaritan who helped me to flee the country.
Who is that?
The late Smith Hempston, the U.S. ambassador, who was concerned with my safety.
How did you get from detention to ambassadors, Smith Hempston's
Well,
house?
I did not know what might have been happening while I was incarcerated, but I was released temporarily. And the story that I know right now is he might have wanted to know what was happening with me, Because while I was working in the intelligence, we also had a group of foreigners who were working with us. And probably it could have been some of those people that were working with us that were concerned about my arrest. They might have mentioned, and I'm not sure on this, but they might have mentioned about my whereabouts. And that might have led to the American government through Smith Hempstone wanting to find out. And as you know, that case was very sensitive. A lot of people lost their lives. Probably somebody wanted to save my life, and maybe he saved it. And of course he did.
So anyway, after detention, you go to Britain?
Yes, I went to Britain where I became a refugee, and I was a grave digger there for 7 years while I was going to law school.
Digging graves?
Yes, sir.
And
yes.
then?
Yes, and I went to law school. I finished my bachelor's of law. Then I did my first master's. I did my second master's. I did a third master's. And I continued until I started my own law practice in Hackney, in London, where I was practicing immigration law. Then a few years later, I decided to cross the Atlantic to go and study the laws of the United States at Baltimore University, of which I did, and I took the Washington, D.C. bar. And then I also became an adjunct professor of law, international comparative law, at American Heritage University, while I was also visiting a professor to other institutions, including Britain.
Why do you need all those master's degrees?
Yeah, because, you know, as a street,
about 5 of them.
It could be more. If we count diplomas, yes, I have more diplomas than 5. But what I wanted was, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something for my country. I wanted to make my country very proud. I wanted to make police officers also to have hope and destiny that whatever they do, they can always achieve something different, just like what the late Bishop Alexander Muge was. He was a police corporal, and he rose up to be a bishop. Mandela in South Africa, I'm told, was a policeman, and he rose up to be a president. And because I lacked education as a street boy, because I lacked people to assist me to reach wherever I could have reached, I wanted actually to try to establish a new paradigm in life so that I could also give others hope. I could also emulate others and let them know that you cannot give up when there is hope. And that's how I decided to become a permanent student. But it paid at the end, and that's why I'm running for president.
Tell us, you have been out of this country from 1991 or 92?
Yes, 92 January.
92 January?
Yes.
You have been out of this country?
I've been out.
Just arrived about 2 months ago?
Well, the first time I came was last year when I came to register, and then register as a voter. And 2 months ago, I came back now to launch my campaign, of which I had launched 22 months ago while in the diaspora, as the first Kenyan in the diaspora to launch presidential campaign.
We launched where? If you launch a
presidential... In the United States.
How does that help you, launching a presidential campaign in America?
We have 3 million Kenyans in the US and Britain, in the diaspora, who are now eligible to vote in the new constitution. Then we have also over 10 million Kenyans who are of Asian ethnicity. So if you count, if you put the 2 numbers together, and these people take advantage of that, then we shall have 13 million Kenyans. And because Kenyans abroad have worked so hard to keep this country going during those 24 years of misrule, they have a duty to this country. They have a cause to fight for, as they have been fighting for. Because lots of people do not know that Kenyans abroad have really done a lot to bring justice in this country by lobbying international community, by participating in different formats to make the international community realize that things were not right at home. And they're only doing that because they wanted to set this country free. So when the new constitution came up, they took advantage and they said, you know what, this is our time, we need to go back home and participate instead of being spectators or speculators. And that's why I decided to join hands with those Kenyans outside to speak the same language and also to start a new phase of Kenyan politics.
Can you tell us what role you have played in terms of struggle when you are away?
Yes.
What is it you have done? I mean,
I think I'm one of those Kenyans who have felt so much cold outside because of the protests that we carried in number 10 Downing Street. We have fought, we have lobbied the British government by that particular time. I personally, when I was at the University of London, School of Oriental and African Studies doing my master's, and as a student leader, I was instrumental in bringing in Koigi Wamwere, Dennis Akumu, Honorable Dennis Akumu, Dr. Liki, Professor Wangari Maathai at SOAS to speak and to tell the world from inside on what was happening in this country. We have also, I also joined the protests.
That's what you mean, School of Oriental and African Studies?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. So I also joined other like-minded Kenyans, like Bwamtum Swale, Honorable Wanyiri Kihoro, who played a very big role, Abdulatif.
Abdulatif Abdallah.
Yes, and Zahur Msalam from the coast, and the coastal community, members of the coastal community that had come in the UK because of what had happened to Sheikh Balala. So we did a lot of protests, and we became known as the enemies of the state, and that's why the government of President Moi was on our heels there, worse than even here. So we've done a lot. We've done a lot.
Apart from targeting those 14 million diaspora people, why do you think Kenyans will vote for you? Well, Kenyans being will vote strangers, you know, essentially you're a stranger. Those many years
I've never been a stranger. We've had so many Kenyans who have been in this country from that particular time or in my absence, who have done a lot of nothing other than damaging this country in terms of corruption.
Yeah.
So if it says that if somebody has been away and is a stranger and somebody has been in the country not being a stranger and has damaged this country more, then you have a duty to come in and correct the misdeeds. And furthermore, I was not out of the country because I wanted to be there. I was out of the country because of my own security. The case I mentioned before, if you make your own research, you'll find out that a lot of witnesses have expired.
Yeah.
So I did not want to come in and expire during that particular time. And I thank the president for having given me this opportunity to come back and be a free man. Because if we didn't have this president, I don't know where this country would be today. The country has become very peaceful for us to come back, and that's why I came back. So answering your question, I'm not a stranger in this country. The umbilical cord and the placenta that came with me from my mother's womb was planted in this country. The fact that I was away without my wanting did not cut off that link between me and this nation. The fact that Jomo Kenyatta was away for so many years, 18 years in exile, did not cut off his link with this country. The fact that people like Mbiu Koinange, who went to study abroad, were away for a long time, did not cut off link with this country. The fact that Nelson Mandela, who became the president of South Africa, was incarcerated for 27 years in prison, did not cut off links between him and South Africa. So the issue of cutting links or having been absent is very relevant at the moment. What is very important is, what can I do to bring changes in this country?
Most of those people you mentioned, they're under critical mass behind them.
They had critical mass?
Critical mass, people who are waiting and they knew they were there.
Yes.
And they were supporting, and they were making noise or whatever they were. You went and studied law.
Right.
And you have done very well, considerably very well in terms of being a scholar, a lawyer. But in terms of politics, you don't have that critical mass that knows you. The last I think the Kenyans probably know about you is when you are portrayed by the Moi government as a madman. And that is not very useful.
I think we are shifting into the new era of politics.
Yes.
And with the new kind of social strategies and with the new era of new thinking, the issue of followers of populism does not arise. It might have a reason in those particular time for the people you mentioned, because there was a need at that particular time. If you look at me, and as I mentioned before, if you look at what we have done abroad, we are remembered with what we have done and what we stood for. I stood firm when a minister was murdered in this country. And I said no to a lot of things, including bribery. And I suffered for all these years outside the country in a different category, because I was a policeman. I was not that important that particular time. And from that time, there's no politician who has been murdered in this country. That's a contribution I made for this country. And having been outside the country also, as I mentioned again, I've managed single-handedly and also joined others later on to bring in people like Koigo Amwere, who people could not associate with. People like Dr. Liki, who had just broken his legs. People like Honorable Dennis Akumu, who was a vocal person. So by standing to bring in those people with what I've suffered and what my people have suffered from, does not really mean that I have to have a mass to follow me. Judge me by what I am and by what I say and by what I stand for, rather than judging me with whoever is following me. After all, most of those people you mentioned had a mass following, but what did they do? Some of them became the worst crooks in this world, but I don't want to go into the crooked part of it because I'm not here to point names at people who did well. But if you look at my homecoming recently, there were 130,000 people. It was on TV. I was away for all those years. What did that mean to me? That meant they were remembering who I was. That has given me some kind of hope that if I'm given the opportunity in this country, especially by the media, because the media has been a lot of like, he's a young man, though I'm 52, he's just coming, he's a deputy. No, I'm just a Kenyan, like any other person. Have
you set up a campaign secretariat? Or
well, that's another point.
What political party are you going to go with?
I have a political party, but I'm going to court today because the registrar of political parties has failed to uphold the statute. We petitioned her and actually put in an application for our political party. And for the last 30 days, which ended on 29th, she did not communicate to us. We have gone to that office so many times. We've wasted a lot of resources sleeping, paying for accommodation here and there. And she was inactive. I'm not here to condemn her, but if you apply the methods or the legal language, particularly where somebody is under statutory obligation to provide, and the person becomes inactive in that case, does not correspond, especially where human rights are concerned, then that person is abusing the Constitution.
But I hope you know the requirements to register a political party.
We know that, we've registered.
Which is what?
One of it is you have to have a name.
Yes.
And that name has to be, you have to pay 500 Kenya shillings to search for the name, which we paid, searched for the name, and we got the name. Then she asked us to pay 100,000, which we paid, and she gave us a letter of authority authenticating our name, and that was on the 29th of the other month. So by statute, she was supposed to give us a provisional certificate within 30 days, which has...
Isn't it a requirement also that you should have a number of people from every...
Yes, under the old act, political, under the Societies Act.
Yes.
Yes, the law requires you to have at least 200 people in every province, now county.
Yes.
But under the new political act, which became effective only last week. And
the new Political Parties Act?
Yeah, it became effective.
What is the requirement?
The requirement is that you must have at least 1,000 members in each and every county.
Do you have that? Do you have that in your list?
We cannot have that unless we are given our certificate, a provisional certificate, so that we can go out there and open offices and solicit members. Otherwise, we shall be violating the Constitution if we went ahead and did without being given the certificate.
So you need a temporary certificate?
Yes, a provisional certificate, which we have gone to court. In fact, my lawyers, as we speak today, are in court today filing that petition to compel her to give us the certificate.
What about the finances? How do you want to finance your political party and your campaign? Well,
the finances, the act is very clear. The political party is very clear. It says, well, once you register, then you can actually solicit funds from members by membership fee, of which we are going to follow the same methodology. And we shall also ask well-wishers who would by then join the party to assist with the party.
But do you have personal resources to sustain a campaign throughout Kenya for your presidential bid?
Well, when Obama started, he didn't have personal resources. But when he started, he talked to the people.
But American is very different. In America, people contribute for you to be president. In Kenya, it's the other way around. No. For you to be elected,
I'll prove you wrong on that, because when I went to Kenya, when I went to Western Province the other day,
yes,
people contributed for me.
Yes.
They contributed a lot of money. Some of them came up with motorbikes 1,000 motorbikes from Kakamega to Mumias.
Yes.
Some of them contributed eggs. Some of them contributed cows. So I don't know, maybe it's the old school, but right now things have changed. Kenyans now are willing to come up and to contribute. I went to Bungoma bus stop, and the border boys there came in and they said, oh, he's here. This is the Uko man. They carried me, and even they gave me 10,000 Kenya shillings contribution. So things have changed. It depends on how you talk with the people. But if you come in the way I can see these other politicians using the money they have stolen from Kenyans to induce Kenyans to vote for them, then I will not go that direction. If I'm given money for the campaign, definitely I will have to follow the Constitution and the laid down procedures to show where that money had come from. Accountability, transparency leads to integrity.
Do you have a system of human beings, I mean, like running mate, supporters across the country?
Well, what I can say right now is we have not reached there yet until we get our provisional certificate. And once we get it, then we shall cross the bridge.
Mr. Wajackoyah, thank you very much. We are run out of time.